Welcome to Talk Mental Health with Logan Noon. This is episode 11, Postpartum Depression, Motherhood's Expectations versus Reality. This episode is with my friend and classmate Elizabeth, who experiences both depression and postpartum depression after her pregnancy. This is really a great conversation and one I was excited to have. As a male, this is something that I'm not gonna experience ever in my life, and something that I've never really talked about with anyone. So this episode, I think, is going to be extremely educational for men in particular, but also I know a lot of women out there, mothers out there, are dealing with these type of issues. I found a stat online, 1 in 8 women, 1 in 8 mothers deal with postpartum depression. That is absurd. And what really shocks me is I did a simple search on YouTube on videos on bipolar depression versus postpartum depression. There are so many more videos on bipolar disorder than postpartum, but more people on this earth experience postpartum depression. It's just crazy how little that this is talked about. So Elizabeth did a great job. She was so inspirational, educational, and most importantly, she's gonna make you laugh. I guarantee that. So I really think you're gonna enjoy this episode. Now, before we get started, I want to have a quick shout out and support to the one and only Demi Lovato. This is probably the one piece of mental health news that you saw in the last week or two. She's someone who does live a sober life, and she had a relapse experience. And I used to work in an addiction facility, and what I'd really encourage all of the patients that I worked with is relapse isn't a failure. Relapse is an opportunity to learn. And so I hope Demi Lovato can do the same thing in this experience, because while I'm not the biggest fan of Demi Lovato's music, sorry, I'm not sorry, Demi Lovato was a tremendous inspiration to me. When I first got out of the psych ward and I would search bipolar disorder depression online, she was one of the people that would pop up as one of the most outspoken celebrities out there. So I just looked at that and I said, listen, if this Disney star can tell people about her bipolar depression and still have fans and people still like her, why can't I live a life like that? So Demi, even me, someone who's not really a fan of your music, was extremely inspired by you. And thank you for everything that you do. And I wish you the best of luck with whatever you're going through. All right. So this is the one and only Elizabeth from my medical school class. I met Elizabeth, was it in anatomy first?
It was an anatomy lab.
And funny enough, how I met Megan in our previous episode was also in my anatomy lab.
Like in your group?
Yeah, in my group. I think it was the group after I had with you. Because you, I think, were the first one ever.
I was there to pop your cherry.
Yeah, no, that was interesting. The first skin, the first cut.
Oh, yeah. It was
creepy.
It was kind of creepy. It was unnerving.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Yeah, there we go. Zing.
Yeah, do you like that?
So I posted at the beginning of the year I did like a bipolar disorder recovery 3. I was like, oh, it's my first day of med school. Like,
I saw it.
Screw the haters who thought I wasn't going to get here telling people I had bipolar disorder openly. I was just so pumped that I got there. So I posted that video. I remember you approached me like soon after.
Yeah, I was creeping hardcore on like Facebook or whatever happened.
Nice.
I don't remember how I got there, but it might have been that you said something that I ended up looking it up. I don't remember. In the video or in class or something? In class. I think you mentioned it during lab because, our 2 lab partners were better dissectors and so they were very busy and we were just chatting. And
goofing around.
Yeah. What?
Never.
We didn't do that.
Never.
And
yeah, I just remember, so you approached me and like, I think you gave me compliments about it and it was really nice and supportive. But then you also talked about your own challenges a little bit.
Yes, probably. I mean, I just knew that when you mentioned it and the conversation started flowing after I'd seen it and I was talking to you, you were talking about what your mission kind of was or what your goal was in doing those YouTubes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I remember just kind of going along with it and I really liked what you're doing because I'm like, it's not talked about enough. Or even if it's talked about, it's like nobody wants to take action or nobody wants to kind of cut through all the BS of it,
Or it's like these government stigma campaigns, which aren't bad, but I just don't, there's a lot of anonymity. And, well, it's just, or it's like celebrities. I feel like it's not people necessarily that you know. So I feel like all my efforts is just kind of like almost Bernie Sanders grassroots, start. Like I just like having more informal conversations with people that I encounter. Because when I'm open about my bipolar disorder, I find that everyone around me seems to also be dealing with mental health. And because I maybe am the first one to speak out about it, it encourages other people to like speak out about what they're going through.
It's amazing how the second you bring it up, everybody, if they feel comfortable with it, will start saying, well, yeah, I've struggled with XYZ. And it's like, how is this not, destigmatized more? Like,
yeah. And if it's not them, it's someone that they love or their family member or... I get my ex-boyfriend had bipolar disorder quite a bit, oddly enough.
An ex.
Yeah, it's always an ex, unfortunately. But it is what it is. So I'm talking to you today mostly about both depression and postpartum depression.
Oh, are we talking about both?
I just want to talk about your life. I just think you're super cool. And kind of hear everything mental health oriented, because I think you have a lot of good suggestions for other women out there, other mothers, and med students that could learn from, things you've been through over the last few years.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, and that's where I'd like to talk. Is I feel like people are not either honest enough, or it's a big taboo to say some of the things I experienced and that I've told other people who are either getting ready to have a kid or going through kind of. Whenever I say depression, I picture those commercials, where somebody's standing by a rainy window and everything is gloomy around them, and I'm like, that's. Okay, yes, it can be like that, but come on, guys. Like, let's take it back to the real world. And so just kind of like chatting about it, I think is good. And I'll warn you, you probably already know this about me, but I will be brutally honest, as in...
That's how we like it here at Talk Mental Health with Logan New. Brutally honest, to the point.
Like, brutally honest, cut through the crap, and I'll probably say things that if my son ever heard this, he'd be like, Mom... And then maybe one day I'll respond to the word mom. And
Well, you also could think of it on the other side of the coin when your son goes to have children one day, and maybe if his, hopefully wife at the time, is experiencing these kind of issues, he can look to this maybe podcast. Like that's another cool thing too, like your story kind of coming out. So I guess before our listeners kind of hear your story, where you're at today, you're a first year medical student, a mother of a 2-year-old?
He's 2.5 as of March 5th. My husband reminded me.
Yeah. And homeowner in good old Yakima. And so basically from the exterior, killing it.
Well, we have several homes because that's kind of what our side business was. And I'm kind of a non-traditional med student because I was in the business world and did some crazy things when I was younger. And then I was like, hey, I don't want to do this and I want to go to medical school. Mm-hmm. Don't know what made that conscious transition like in my mind. I remember sitting at my desk and our VP of marketing, and this was a big company, like walked by and he's like, oh, I have to go get my Maserati, picked up from the shop to, as my loaner or something like that. Yeah. And I remember thinking, I really don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
and then for some reason med school popped in my head and I was like, okay. Let's
really? Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. It was kind of a spur of the moment, and I took a few weeks to kind of think it over and be like, wait, am I serious? Like, do I even remember how to read a textbook?
And how old are you at this stage of your life?
I was at the corporate level. So when I made that decision, I think I was 25.
Okay. Pre-baby. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Way pre-baby.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like, wait, do the math. Even though, we can pretend I'm still 29 or something if you want.
Yeah. And so you went back to school, you took the necessary classes, gained entrance into medical school eventually.
Yeah.
So still, like, I always like to say from the Facebook perspective, Elizabeth is having the dream life. She was successful in business, went back to school, eventually gained a seat into medical school.
Married a very handsome Texan man.
Extremely handsome Texas man.
Jawline.
And at some point in that, how many years period, you had a son, 2-year-old healthy baby son.
Yeah.
But, what you were experiencing on the personal side wasn't exactly all the gloom and amazingness that we could see from Facebook.
Yeah, from the Facebook perspective, and that's such a great way of putting it, because from Facebook it looks like everything is just fantastic, and it is. I feel like I've kind of gotten everything I could ask for, and it's just amazing. And whenever I think about that, or if somebody, ever alludes to that, I have to remind that I worked my ass off, like every which way, and all along the way, it was a constant battle. I feel like, from deciding to leave the business world to right here today.
Yeah. So when did sort of that, it was, I guess, prior to your son, like just depression sort of start for you, and what did that look like?
So actually, my depression started back in college, and I had a family history of it. Some diagnosed, some not. And what happened is that my college sweetheart, who I dated for, 4+ years, something like that, got deployed. He was in the Marine Corps. And I went to go study abroad because I was a double foreign language major. So I was living in Russia and Spain. And for some reason, while I was abroad, I remember I wasn't handling things well. Like, people would make me mad, and I'd get so angry I would like shake. And I didn't know what was going on. My sleep was all off, and I returned home, and my boyfriend at the time came back from deployment safe. And I remember one day I was sitting in my room at school, and I just heard this little voice say, "I think you should cut yourself because you'd feel better." And I turned to my boyfriend at the time, and I was like, "Hey, I think something's going on, because I just heard a weird voice, and I swear I'm not crazy, but that just happened." And I'm very fortunate because he took it seriously. He didn't judge me for it, anything like that. He actually called my dad. My dad was like, "We need to get her up here to see somebody." So he put me in the car, and we drove up to my hometown here in Yakima. I think that day or the next day or something like that. So, and then I met with this psychiatrist who was awesome. He was like the old school kind of psychiatrist. He smoked a pipe.
Okay.
And
did he have one of those Freud, like, weird couches?
No, I don't think it was quite like that. He did have a couch. It was leather, and it was a nice couch, but he did have the leather elbow patches.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice touch.
Right. Yeah, and the beard that he would stroke, like, as he was thinking. So anyway, he got me on some medicine, and I was like, "Oh, this sucks." And once that got figured out, I started feeling better. Like, never heard that voice again. I never had the urge to like hurt myself. It was more just like something was going on, something was off. I didn't want to go on medication. I remember fighting that really bad until somebody mentioned to me. They're like, if you had diabetes, you would take the medicine. If you, when you have a cold, you take medicine. And I was like, oh, it's like my brain has the sniffles. And that's what I always thought of, like, my brain has the sniffles. I'm going to give it some, sniffle medication. Yeah. I think that's a technical term, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think that's in our medical literature somewhere. Yeah, for sure.
It's like session 49.
But it's interesting you say that your kind of mental health challenges started studying abroad. Because imagine you were like 21 or whatever-ish then.
I was 20 when I moved to Russia. But I think it had been a lot of things leading up. Okay. And I think maybe just the trauma of the man I really, really loved, like, just all of a sudden going. And I didn't have, like, military experience or anything like that. It really messed with my head. And it was still during the bad time, like, in Iraq. So it was 2005. And it was, like, every time on the news, it was always, like, so many Marines have died today, and so many people in the Army, or so many American fight. And, they didn't have all those communication space. So I was able to send him emails that I think the Red Cross would print off and then get to him. Yeah. But he wasn't able to get back to me very easily. I don't quite remember, but the communication was not good. Yeah. And then you move to Russia, and you're like, okay, I don't know how my Russian was terrible. So I didn't know how to, like, find an internet cafe and send emails and stuff. And
and it must have been extremely isolating.
It was, but it also, I think because I was already showing signs of depression, like, I handled feeling isolated just fine. And I've always kind of been, I don't want to say a loner because that has a negative connotation, whatever, but I've always kind of enjoyed my company. Like, I'm like, oh, hey, what's going on?
Well, interesting. When I was right around the same age, and why I brought up the whole study abroad is because my mental health stuff started when I was studying abroad.
Where were you at?
In Scotland. And what really, instead of, I mean, I don't know if I sometimes enjoy my isolation. I kind of get when you say that. But then what I would do to shut my little voice head up, because I had a little voice in my brain that would tell me, there's a bunch of cliffs in Scotland. It would tell me, like, go over those cliffs and throw yourself off. And like you, like, I hated those thoughts, and I was extremely embarrassed by those thoughts, and I certainly didn't want to do it.
Right.
But they happened, and they were reoccurrent. And so, unlike you, though, I didn't have anyone that I felt comfortable speaking out with at that time. So what I did was turn to whiskey. And I was using whiskey to really shut all that voice up in my head. And it didn't work, of course. But that continued for that whole next, like, 2-year period before I had my psychosis episode.
Yeah.
And kind of ended up in the hospital.
Yeah. I was very fortunate, and luckily I'm not a whiskey drinker. Mm-hmm. But I was in Russia, and I did enjoy vodka. Yep. Still do. But yeah, I just remember that little voice, and I was like, well, where the hell did that come from?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I wanted to do anything or follow through with it. It was just like, where is that, like, I'm sorry, like, I felt like somebody was, like, in my ear whispering something. Mm-hmm. And it was really weird, you know, and I'm sure you kind of had the same thing where you're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Where you don't have a desire to do it, you're like, what the hell is that? Like, I don't understand. And I'm glad I had somebody I trusted and felt comfortable with to, like, say something, and that,
Well, for me, it would those thoughts would trigger an anxiety, almost like obsession. And I'd keep thinking about, why do I have that thought? Why do I have that? And I just kind of keep going back to that, and I'd be like, well, it'd be 4 hours since I had that last thought, or a week, or a day. But I'd always kind of, like, know exactly when. I'd like this weird time thing when I was going through the really bad anxiety and depression, of where, like, I always knew, like, how much sleep I was kind of getting, or basically lack of sleep I was losing. So that was really interesting. So you said you kind of figured out some depression. You saw that, old school Freud-like psychiatrist.
God, I loved him.
You loved him. That's great.
Well, I mean, I made him very uncomfortable. So he would just smoke his pipe a little faster and, like, more frantically as I talked.
But, you said you were fighting the medication thing at first, but eventually sort of opened up to it. And when you started using the meds, did they work well for you at first, or was it kind of a whole evolution of it?
So I was really fortunate that because my family had a history of depression, he was like, what medication they've been on has worked well for them, it would probably work well for you. So I got on Zoloft. Okay. And did, the, titrate, like the increase, slow increase. And luckily, I didn't realize it, but, things just started feeling better, and I felt like I could go and do things again. Yeah. So that was nice.
Now, so you were, starting to get back to your normal self. Like, how long was that period from when shit was really bad to that period where you started taking the meds, the Zoloft or whatever it was, and feeling better?
So I think, and I don't know if it was the same way with your medication, like with these meds, it always takes a lot longer than you would expect. Mm-hmm. Because it's like when you take a Sudafed, you feel it pretty quickly. Whereas I think the mental health kind of drugs take quite a while. So I know it was a solid, like, 2 months before I really started feeling like me again. Like, I started feeling better slowly, but it was really like 2 months until I was like, oh, okay, I'm not shaking in rage. Like, yeah. Which is weird, because depression, manifests in different ways for different people, and it's hard because you think when you're on the inside, as you know, it's happening to you, you don't realize that something is off. You're just like, God, I'm angry, like, and you just kind of go with it, and you have to wait for somebody, hopefully, will say something for you to go, oh, okay, something's going on. Yeah. Like, whoops. Yeah. I should have known that.
No, sir. And you think, like, you're all normal and cool and kind of have it under control before you feel like, at least for me, it took someone who, it was a best friend of mine and I think a family member, to really convince me, like, hey, do you realize, like, you're not acting like yourself right now. You've been up 4 days in a row, like, acting all weird. Like, and I think, so that's why I always feel mental illness can't be handled in isolation, because if you don't have that social support, like, I don't know. It's really hard.
And I don't know how it is with some of the other things, but it's like when you're depression, the medication is not always going to be effective. Like, you can develop the tolerance, and like it can start slipping or not be as effective no matter what's going on. And it really takes having, like, your family or, your crew, for lack of a better term, that will start. They're the ones who will notice before you will, long before you will. Yeah. Because in your head, everything's fine. You're taking your medicine. You're being, well, in my case, a good little girl, following directions, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So I think that's one of the hardest things people don't realize, is that when your loved one starts saying something, they're not doing it to be, you know, jackasses or because they don't understand. They're saying like, hey, can I help you with something? And hopefully when you hear it, you go, what's making more than one person say this? Like, and that's when hopefully people will pick up the phone and like make calls, or somebody will call for them, or, you know, you can Google, but you know,
So was there anything else that you did besides the medication, besides seeing that one psychiatrist? Were you speaking to a therapist at that time? Were you, I don't know, starting to exercise more?
No and no. I was drinking a lot.
Okay.
Because it was college.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But besides that, no. Now, what's weird, though, is with mine became kind of like I went off of my medication a couple of years later, and I was fine for years until I hit another big stressor, which was basically leaving the business world, not knowing anybody where I moved, because I moved to Austin, Texas, which is amazing. But and then I had a really bad breakup with I dated my best friend, which was probably not the smartest thing to do, and we had a really ugly breakup. And I didn't handle it well because of all the stressors. You know how when you're going through those prereqs and everything, and you're just like, oh my God, like I feel like the world is falling all the time. Yeah. And then I ended up going back on my medication. And so I don't know if it was like attributed to just situational depression, which is definitely a thing, or what it was. But for a few years there, I was doing great. Like, didn't need the meds. I could do whatever. And I was a happy clam.
Yeah. No, and I hear that a lot, you know, especially it seems like with depression where people like may need the med for this period of time of life, but then there's certain times where they don't. And then on the other side of the coin, bipolar disorder, I've been on the same med now for 6 years, Depakote.
Have you changed your dosage
a little bit. It's gone down a little bit, but I still have like a steady dose of about 1,000 a day. But I like want to not have to take medication, but I'm terrified because for bipolar disorder, I've just heard and met so many people who they do well taking the medication for a few years, but then they have that deep desire, oh, I don't want to take this crap, I feel fine. Yeah. And then they come off and then they have a psychotic episode and they have to restart the whole process again. So it's so different for every single mental illness. And so I always just try to remind people that, and how like the medication is only one piece of your recovery. Yeah. So did you ever start speaking to a therapist in either bouts of these depression or?
So in college, now that we're talking about it, I did for a while. Okay. For me, that reminds me. For me, like going and talking to a therapist is great, and it works really, really well for some people. I'm so happy people do it. For me, it wasn't super effective because I felt like I was just talking out of my ass a lot. And like, for me, I'm an action person. So it's like, yeah, we can sit there and talk about things and try, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever. But at the end of the day, like, I want to know what I need to do to make this better. And that's not really with like the usual kind of therapists. A lot of them are not centered on that. Now, I tried hypnotherapy, which I loved. Okay. Oh my God, I loved hypnotherapy, and I would go back for anything if I felt like I couldn't handle something. Okay. So hypnotherapy was absolutely amazing, unreal. And if anybody is like, you know, I don't want to do X, Y, or Z, or they're just kind of at a loss of what to do, look up and find a good hypnotherapist, because that is, I just loved it.
So I don't know a whole lot about hypnotherapy. So like, awesome. I mean, if you could describe it to me in a minute or less. Deal. Like, what was that sort of experience for me? What did you gain from that? How many times did you have to go?
So, the one I saw, I don't remember. I actually think a psychic referred me to this dude. A psychic? Like, okay. This is when I was living in Vegas, and a psychic was like, yeah, you should go meet Lane. His name was Lane, and he was like...
Did he get a referral bonus for that?
Like... Well, I don't know, but I know that he was like 90 years old.
They send business to each other?
Yeah. Like, well, I can't fix you, so you're going to have to go see the psychic and see what's really going on. Anyway, Lane was this cool old dude, and basically what happens is they make you all comfy in like a comfy chair, and you get a blankie, and you get all warm, and they put you, quote unquote, under. And with that, you basically, you know everything. That this is the big thing I didn't know, because I was like, what the hell is this creepy old dude gonna do to me? Yeah. So you know everything that's going on. It's just that your subconscious can't resist, like, being open to listening, basically, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. You can't, like, be like, no, that's just, you know, if they say something, like, you have to think on it. Like, you're not allowed to just put up your usual defenses. Okay. So that still sounds kind of creepy since I was talking about an old man. But what I mean is, like...
Well, are you just in, like, a suggestive state of mind where that person can kind of dictate what you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of guide the conversation, but naturally you just start kind of, like, verbally vomiting certain things, or you can be really quiet. But it's weird because... you hear them and you're talking and all of a sudden you're saying things that you had no idea that you felt. Mm-hmm. Or it's bringing up memories that you had somehow been suppressing. And I think it has good and bad, because I did get something out of it that I kind of wish he hadn't brought up. And now, but it's also kind of good to identify it. And it's a lot of anger at somebody I didn't realize I was angry at. Mm-hmm. And I hate it because now I realize that, like, I'm angry at this person. But at the same time, that could be good. I don't know. Anyway, it's weird because when they bring you out of it, you're under for like 45 minutes. You do a little bit of talk beforehand, talk about your goals, etc. Then you get hypnotized, put under, and then you come about. And I know that for the first few times I did it, the back of my brain felt very fuzzy and tingly. It was really weird. Okay. And he ended up making me like a custom CD that I could listen to at night. Because he's like, that's going to be, until you learn how to hypnotize yourself, like, that's going to be the best way for this to kind of work. And it's a lot of, like, very positive messages, just saying, like, however you're feeling, it's okay. Like, yeah, you know, stop resisting the way you're feeling. You know, it's okay to feel however you do. And it's just kind of like, oh. Okay. Yeah.
And did you use the tapes? I almost called them meditation tapes because they sound like...
It kind of is, but it's not, because it's very tailored towards you and it can be a conversation. So it could be like us talking right now, where if you had me hypnotized, I'd just be like, yeah, I hate doing homework, or I hate studying something.
Yeah, certainly.
Anyway.
I feel your pain.
Yes.
Feel your pain very much so.
So, yes, I used them. I loved them.
Okay.
Yeah. But you don't have to go as often, and I really like that, because the idea of going to a therapist every week really, really annoyed the shit out of me. Like, yeah. Like, I've got stuff to do and I want to live my life. I don't want to sit there boo-hooing about something if I'm not going to do something about it.
Yeah, and I think you just kind of touched on one of the biggest challenges of mental health. Any sort of treatment, whether it be medication, therapy, it's normally long-term. Now, maybe hypnotherapy is a quicker fix, but it's probably not also super quick by any means. I don't think any of them are.
I think it's like just a shortcut. Cut the bullshit. Let's get down to the real issue, because now you're in a state where you can't pretend like everything's okay, because it's not okay. Yeah. Something's wrong, and that's okay, but something is wrong. So how did you get here? What's going on besides the, actual physiological changes in your brain? Mm-hmm. So I really like that. And I still go on occasion. Like, I've gone probably 12 times in my life. Okay. So it's not like all the time. And I've switched because I've moved and I've addressed different issues. And
you haven't seen the same hypnotherapist?
I saw Lane, like, I think 2 or 3 times. Okay. He was just super cool, too.
Interesting. Well, maybe I'll have to give this whole hypnotherapy a try. I mean, I'm a big advocate. I have seen a therapist. I don't see one now, though, because I don't feel I have a need. But I'm certainly open to it again in the future. But also, I really like meditating. And it kind of sounds like some of the stuff you've been doing is practicing meditation in some form. Okay, so you were... This part of the story, you haven't had the child yet, you're not pregnant. So you're basically doing better with medication, with maybe hypnotherapy kind of here and there.
Right. Then got off the medication, kind of moved forward with life. And then right after that bad breakup, actually, that's when I met my husband. Like, we were actually hanging out within like 48 hours of the breakup. And we were just friends. Like, we didn't know the other person was uninvolved because he had a serious girlfriend. And it just... You would think that would kind of like snap me out of things, but it didn't. Yeah. And I remember about 5 weeks into our relationship, he made me kind of have the talk, quote unquote, the talk, about whether I saw a future, because I really wanted us to get a dog. That's all I really wanted.
That's a future talk, though. That's it's like, this is commitment. Like, this is serious.
Yeah, but to me it was like, I want a dog. Like,
okay.
I love dogs.
Like, even if you're out of here, I'm going to keep the dog.
Yeah, like
this is mine in the divorce.
I can say we're getting a dog, but really I want a dog and you should support it.
Okay. Okay. Laying down the law.
Yeah, except
That's fine.
Then he came back and because he's texting and he's like, nope, we're going to do this and we're going to have the talk. And we ended up talking about like, what are comparable things to you in your life goals and what's like not disputable, you know? And his thing, mine was, I want to go to medical school. So whoever I'm with, if it's going to be you have to support it. Like, that is just non-negotiable to me. Mm-hmm. And, you know, other crap, like, I can get around. And he said, mine is having children. And I actually I wasn't super crazy. I was kind of on the fence, but I was mostly, like, not really that interested.
Okay. Ever or just at that time in your life? Ever. Okay.
Yeah. When I was little, my mom still remembers me saying, like, I don't want to be a mother. Like, I don't want to have children.
Okay.
Which, you know, I don't know what drove me to that. I think because I told my parents, I'm like, no, children are exhausting. I know because I exhaust you guys. I take your money. Like, you know, I cause you guys headaches and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, why would you put yourself through that?
True.
So why have them?
Yeah.
You know, everybody acts like it's okay, but really, like, why have them?
Well, nonetheless, here you are, mother of a 2-year-old.
Yeah. So Josh and I was like, okay, but here's the thing is I really like my husband.
Yeah.
And so I was like, fine, we can have kids, you know. And I was like, but you have to get me a trainer if I get pregnant because I don't want to get fat. Like, that was my other big thing.
That's the other deal. Sign the contract. Yeah.
Because I was in amazing shape at that point. And I missed that. But anyway, so we decided right after we got married, I'm like, I don't know when else we would have a kid. Let's just do this. Like, let's have the kid. And it was all very like, okay, we're on board. You know, it was planned, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I think we thought it would take longer, but it happened like first try. Like, which we still laugh about.
Batting 1,000%.
Yeah. Like, I don't know batting averages. It sounds good.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I had already been on my antidepressant medicine at that point because...
For like a few years at that point, right? Or...
Well, we got engaged within a year.
Okay.
And then got married less than a year later, and I was pregnant like 3 months after.
Okay. But either way, you had been on that one med for a little while, an extended period, whatever it might be.
Yeah, like...
Then got pregnant.
Yeah, a couple years.
Okay.
Now that I think about it. Anyway, so I had a great pregnancy, actually. Mm-hmm. I had it pretty easy. I had some really stressful stuff going on because I'd switched jobs, and I went into EMS. And where I was working, they demand that you do like CrossFit and self-defense training and all this crazy stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like 8 weeks pregnant. Like,
yeah.
And I had no idea. Like, who the hell knows what's okay to put a baby through?
Yeah.
Like, we're sitting there in class and people are like, you know, trying to show off about stuff. And I'm like, hey, I'm over here growing a lung. Like, chill out.
2 of them, hopefully. Yeah.
We haven't checked. Anyway, so that was going on.
But so you were taking the med, but when you got pregnant, did you at all go off of it? Or did you and your doctor decide to keep you on?
Okay, I'm really glad you brought that up. So some people get really weird about medication in pregnancy. Now, I am not a doctor.
Yet.
I'm not a doctor yet. Oh yeah, that's right. Medical school. So I stayed on sertraline, which is the generic Zoloft, through my whole pregnancy. My doctor and I talked about it. He was really great. We brought in a couple other physicians, not because I didn't believe him, but because I just naturally don't trust anyone.
Well, and you want to be extremely protective.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah.
Even though, honestly, I was like protective, but I wasn't attached to what was happening. So I want to make that clear in case anybody who's listening is like, hey, I'm pregnant, but I don't feel attached to what's happening. Like, some people have always dreamt of becoming mothers and things like that, and that is wonderful because I am so glad there are those people in this world, but I was not one of them.
Okay. And
don't get me wrong, now I mostly love being a mother. Mm-hmm. Okay, because we promised brutal honesty, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, it's okay if you don't feel a connection or whatever. right away. And so it was like, yeah, I was thinking about my child, but I also was like, well, crap, I'm already having to give up 9 million things. The last thing I need is to go into like a depressive episode.
Yeah.
And so it was great because I was able to keep taking my medicine. The problem is I think it covered up a lot of these little undertides that were happening that I didn't catch on to. And in retrospect, I realized that things were happening before they got like bad, quote unquote. It was still happening. So it's, for instance, okay, when you get pregnant, you have this moment, well, for me, you have this moment where you're like, holy shit, like this is actually happening. Like when those 2 little lines appear or whatever, you're like, like I remember because I took a pregnancy test for fun thinking there's no way. Yeah. And I was making coffee and then I was like, oh, I should go check it. And I brought it in, I looked down and the little second pink line was there and I was like, I just remember stopping, turning around, pouring out my coffee, and then starting to make decaf. Because I had read that somewhere, like, you're not supposed to have.
Yeah, probably can't have anything.
And Josh worked for the American Red Cross disaster relief at the time, and there had been a huge flood in San Antonio, so he was out of town. Okay. And I called him, and I was just like, since things have kind of slowed, I would like to request that you come home. And I think I sounded weird on the phone, and he was just like, is everything okay? And I was like, I'm pulling a wife card. I need you to come home. Yeah. So he floored it from San Antonio. Like, he had never heard. And I don't pull the wife card very often. I think I have like twice in my life. Anyway, so he comes home, and I tell him, and he, he's so excited. And I'm really excited too, but I'm also like, it doesn't hit you. You're like, no, this isn't happening. Like, so the things that started happening that should have given off more of a danger sign, I think, is like, for the female, your whole world changes. Like, you don't realize it at the time, but from that point on, like, your whole world changes. So suddenly you're not allowed to, it starts out with little things like, oh, I have to be conscientious of the fact that, like, I'm growing something, and then it's like, oh, I don't need to buy tampons because I'm not going to have my period. And then it becomes, oh, I'm not supposed to have caffeine, or, hey, I can't unwind with a glass of wine, or, oh my God, I'm not supposed to eat sushi or have soft cheese, or all this shit is changing, and it's not happening to your partner. And I didn't realize at the time, but it was really frustrating. So at one point I remember getting kind of cranky, and I told Josh, like, this is still a contentious point in our marriage, by the way. Yeah. I was like, I want you to go on the pregnancy diet for 1 week to see what it's like. And he wouldn't do it. And I wanted to shank him in the throat. Yeah, understandably. Like, because it sounds like an asshole thing. And I was like, and I told him, this is kind of an asshole move. And he was like, it's because why would both of us be off of caffeine? He goes, there's no way that that's going to lead to anything good happening.
That's awesome.
And I was like,
we can't be productive like this.
He was like, nothing good can come from this. And I remember just sitting there with like crazy eyes staring at him. And he like backed away slowly, went to the freezer, pulled out some chocolate ice cream, walked over, put it in front of me with a spoon, and like walked away.
He's this wise man.
I wanted to throw it at his head.
Oh.
Like, and I love my husband. And like I said, I had a good pregnancy. So, but the hormones, man, they get you. They're like, you can talk about it but until you've gone through it, you have no idea what emotional roller coaster it is.
Well, I will never go through it. So what would you say to your husband?
We don't know that yet.
That's true. I don't want to go through some sort of weird male pregnancy. But what would you say to a husband who's maybe listening, whose wife might be going through some depression or whatever it may be? How do you paint that picture for him? Or just pregnancy, yeah. And just like help him sort of understand the BS that you're going through. So
it's like when you're starting, in some ways, it's almost like when you're starting to get drunk and you're not making smart choices, and it's kind of like an out-of-body experience where you're watching yourself and you're like, that doesn't make sense, don't do that. Or it's kind of like, it's like that. It's like there's kind of a crazy person living inside of you. I think that's what it's like. But I don't know. I guess I'd have to think on that a little more, how to better describe it. There's just no sense or reason. I remember one time sitting on the couch next to Josh. The TV was not on. We were just hanging out. It was a really nice little evening. He was drinking water respectfully. And I was like staring at the wall or something. All of a sudden, I got those like Stewie Griffin crazy eyes. Yeah. And I just slowly turned my head to him. And I was like shaking with rage. I was like, I'm so angry at you right now. And he was like reading a magazine, because I remember this. And he like stopped. And he didn't even make eye contact. And he was like, do you know why? And I was like, no, but I'm pissed.
But like, I know.
I was so angry at him. He hadn't done anything. Like, and he just kind of slowly put his magazine down. He wouldn't make eye contact. He was like, do you want to talk about it? And I was like, don't you mock me. Like, I remember just wanting to choke him. There's no reason. And then all of a sudden it was gone. And I was like, so what do you want to do for dinner? And he was just like, he didn't know what to do. So
this is all in the midst of you saying your pregnancy went well, you think?
Oh, I had a great pregnancy.
Okay. So other women out there are probably, they might have wilder stories than you, kind of thing.
Well, one thing is that I did get bad nausea. Like, I felt very dizzy, and it was when I was going through all that CrossFit stuff and stupid things they made me do at that job that they shouldn't have. And ladies, don't be afraid to advocate for yourselves. Like, I should never have gone through. Anyway. So one of my friends is a physician, and she wrote me for, Phenergan. Wait, not Phenergan. God, it's okay. Anyway, well, she wrote me for why am I spacing?
We'll put it in the show.
Yeah, the anti-vomiting medicine.
Oh, yeah.
Zofran.
Okay.
So if ladies have any hesitation about taking that, I know I'm not every woman, and I know I'm not a doctor, but my child is very, very healthy.
There you go.
And very active and very happy.
Yeah.
So I did that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So during the pregnancy, do you think you were depressed? Or do you think you were just experiencing pregnancy?
That's what's hard to tell. And that's why I think so much of what ended up happening went kind of like verbalized, recognized, etc.
Well, what do you mean by what was happening? Like, just like mood swings?
So, yeah, I was having mood swings, and I would have like intermittent anger, and then all of a sudden I would feel kind of sad, but I was really excited, and I felt guilty about being sad because I'm like, oh my God, you're pregnant, you are married to this wonderful man, you have so many great things are happening. And I got into the graduate program at another medical school, and so we decided to move and go for it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Like, I got in, and like everything was great. I did not, I thought I would look like a gargoyle when I was pregnant or something, because that's just how I always pictured pregnant women, or like the scene from Alien. And I was an adorable pregnant woman. Like, I had like that whole glow thing going for me. So that's what I mean by a good pregnancy, is like, yeah, I had a huge belly, but I had a pretty easy pregnancy.
Okay.
So,
and all this kind of random mood stuff you maybe attribute just to pregnancy, not really. So at this point, it almost seems like your depression was well managed, and you were just going through the craziness of pregnancy.
See, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Because you compare notes with other people, and they can commiserate on some things and not others, but that could just be because people respond differently to pregnancy.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to separate the two, or to even know if something else is bothering you. So the thing is, though, at that point we had a huge life change, which is that we picked up and moved halfway across the country. And suddenly I was alone. I didn't know anybody. And Josh got a position with the Red Cross there. And so he had to travel 45 minutes each way to work. And I was alone a lot of the time, except for school, but I felt very ostracized. Like, women can view you as, I don't know, like pregnancy is contagious almost. So you can feel pretty isolated pretty quickly. I was 7 months pregnant at that point, I remember. And I was struggling in school because pregnancy brain is real.
Yeah, okay? Well, I don't know what that really means.
So you get kind of foggy brained, and you can't remember things, and it's just, It's just weird.
Brain doesn't work the same way as when the baby's not there.
Well, yeah. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Either when you're on top of your game, it's very different than when you're pregnant.
Mm-hmm. After now the pregnancy went great. Baby boy came out, popped out great.
No,
he did not pop out great.
He did not pop out great.
Oh, okay.
So
I thought you kept saying you had a great pregnancy.
I did have a great pregnancy, but I had a fall at 34 weeks pregnant.
Damn.
So, and it was on concrete stairs.
Ooh.
I didn't go tumbling down them, but basically my dog was on a tie-out thing, and I was letting her use the restroom, and she all of a sudden whipped around me and basically hog-tied my legs, and I just ate shit.
Oh.
Fell straight down on my butt, and you would have thought I had more padding at that time, but I didn't.
Yeah.
And I really freaked out, so I had to go to the hospital, and Josh was out of town, and so I only say that because I'm not bitter about it, but just because I didn't really know what to do, so I remember calling my mom, who's a nurse, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And she was like, you need to go to the hospital right now. Call your obstetrician. You need to go. And they made me go in for fetal heart monitoring.
Okay.
So everything was fine, it seemed. But then Harlan ended up coming about 2 weeks early.
Okay.
And he was a meconium birth. So you know what meconium is?
I don't really.
Okay, so...
First year med student here. That's second year. Okay? Relax.
Is it? Yeah, it is second year.
Come on.
I don't know.
I'm barely passing the classes now. I can't get ahead. I can't get ahead of the curriculum here.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Anyway, so meconium, it's so gross sounding. It's basically when the baby passes, poops while still in utero.
Okay.
So, and the big scare is, whether when they come out, they'll, aspirate it or anything like that. So I didn't see him because I was too busy using terrible words. But I guess he was pretty green. I do know that he was supposed to be on my chest, like everybody preaches about that. Yeah. And I kept saying, where is my child? It was an ER resident, and he played hot potato at first and kind of threw him up on my chest. So I felt him for a second, and it felt like this weird squid, and I didn't realize he had come out. And then all of a sudden he was gone, and it's because he wasn't breathing.
Oh, wow. So
if anybody knows anything about Apgar scores, his were 4, and then they became 8 or something, but that's really bad. I say really bad, but it's not good. It's not where you want your kid to be.
And what is that score? Is it
It's out of 10, I think.
Blood index or
God, we're gonna.
Index
It's health of the baby.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, you want that number to be high, and it wasn't. And I just was so confused because I was like, well, why the hell isn't the kid with me? So it turns out, he had a little startle or whatever, but I think that's some guilt I still carried around, was thinking, what did I do to cause this? Because as a mother, and I don't know if dads have the same thing, as a mother, you can never get away from this sense of guilt. No matter what you're doing, even if you're just doing everything tells you to do, you just feel guilty. You feel guilty that you're not spending enough time with your kid. You feel guilty that you're not teaching them the right things, that you're not, attentive or loving enough. It's a lot of pressure. You feel guilty all the time. Mm-hmm.
So right when the baby popped out, you felt guilty that maybe you did something.
Well, I didn't know what was going on, but I felt guilty immediately that why isn't this kid skin to skin like everything tells me to be? Mm-hmm. And then he looked cute or whatever, and I got to hold him, and it was really cool because I had been calling him Sprout throughout my pregnancy because I couldn't really humanize him yet. And then I was like, "Hey, Sprout," and he just looked at me, and it was like, "Oh." And I thought I would feel this great love and, affection because it's your child. You've been carrying this thing for 9 months or whatever. And I didn't feel like that. I was like, okay, now what?
Okay.
Which was, nobody really fesses up to that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. I have a baby. And, we stayed overnight in the hospital and family was there and blah, blah, blah. We end up taking our kid home and it's just surreal. I swear any day his real parents are going to show up to pick him up. Mm-hmm. I just feel like I've been babysitting for a really long time or have a very demanding little house guest. But mental health wise, when I got home, a couple days, I think it was a couple days after you deliver, you have this huge hormonal surge. So that's something. Well, first of all, side note, the first poop after having a child is something that nobody can describe to you. So
is it glorious or just it's terrible?
It's terrible.
Oh.
So I just want anybody who listens to be aware of that, because not many people own up to it.
Oh. I hope Magdalena's listening. I'll be like following her 48 hours after. Be like, I know what you did.
No, it's just so painful. Like, your body has gone through war and nobody anyway, so getting back to the mental health portion.
Yeah.
48 hours or so, you have this huge hormonal surge. And I had to call Josh. I was upstairs. I had to call him on the mobile. Anyway, and I was bawling. I was like, I need you to come upstairs.
I'm playing the wife card again.
Like, luckily his mother was there, because I was like, I don't care where the baby is. Just please come upstairs. I was convinced that he was going to die.
The baby?
No, Josh and the baby.
Husband.
They were both going to die.
Okay.
Because they mattered to me.
Yeah.
They were important to me. They were both going to die, and I knew it was going to happen in a car accident, and I knew it was going to happen on a freeway where there were a lot of trees, and I knew they were going to die, and I was going to be alone. Mm-hmm. And I was just inconsolable. And then it started hitting where I didn't realize this. I thought everybody felt like this, but, I hated breastfeeding. Mm-hmm. I hated it. And my mom, who's a lactation consultant, ironically, she was like, well, it's wonderful. It's a bonding experience, And I think I had one session where I was like, oh, he's cute. And, but the rest of it was like, kid, would you hurry the hell up? He was a snacker. So he'd like take a few slurps and then just like
chill
smack
out.
His lips. And I'm like, I need to sleep because I have to go to school tomorrow. Like, and I get angry at him.
So why didn't you use like a pump?
So it's kind of complicated. Like, because supposedly it's really good for the kid to nurse directly from the breast. Okay. I did use a pump, but I actually did not get a full milk supply because of I don't know if it was depression or the stress from school, but I just remember being very begrudging, and, you're sleep deprived, and I just felt like this kid I was like, okay, I'm supposed to be enjoying this. This is supposed to be a nice experience. And I really begrudged him. Mm-hmm. And then kind of the anger came back. And Josh and I had worked out code words in the beginning, thank God.
And how long post, how old was the baby at this point?
It was after everybody left, so it was within a week.
Oh, okay.
And he wasn't gaining weight. He was losing weight, which is bad news bears with a baby. So, and I didn't realize how bad it was until my mom showed up like a week later. But luckily, so this was a huge thing for us, thank God. But Josh and I worked out code words where basically, I don't know if you've seen the show Scrubs, but
of course, hilarious. Yeah.
So you know how Carla had a baby and she had postpartum depression, but that Elliot is kind of just crazy. So I would tell him if the baby was just kind of driving me crazy, like, I would be like, hey, I'm feeling really Elliot right now, so can you take the baby? And he would take the baby. Okay. Or he'd be like, just 1 second, If I said, I'm feeling very Carla right now, that meant that he needed to drop whatever he was doing. It was like, emergent, come take the baby. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it was because I was sleep deprived. I was stressed. I know there was some depression going on because I would just get so mad because he wouldn't stop crying. Mm-hmm. And he was, I don't know if he was colicky, but he had really bad intestinal, because I wasn't producing enough milk. And also I didn't want to give him formula because my mother being a lactation consultant, I thought oh, it's rat poison, which it's not. It is not. Anyway, once again, the mother guilt. Yeah. So I'm sitting there, and there were literally times I wanted to take the child and throw him out the second story window, shut the window, and just go back to sleep. Yeah. I hated him. I absolutely hated him. And then I hated my husband, even though he was trying everything he could. He had to go work, and I hated that my whole world felt like it was turned upside down and his was still semi-sane. Normal, yeah. And I was angry. I felt so isolated. I was I don't want to say I was crying. There was a lot of anger. Mm-hmm. I really begrudged the kid. And, when you're in your right frame of your mind, you're like, oh my God, it's a cute little baby or whatever. And now it's a little different, but I mean, he would cry and I would just I remember at some points I think I did scream at him a few times. I'm really lucky I didn't like hurt him or hit him, because I mean, it's definitely possible. Like,
yeah,
it's terrible to say, but I totally understand why people hit children now. I'm not saying it's right.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't do it. That is a terrible thing still.
But they can evoke those emotions. And I was actually watching a postpartum YouTube video prior to coming over here.
Really?
Yeah. And the woman actually told a story kind of extremely similar, where the baby was crying and she had tried for hours to console this baby. It wasn't working. And it got to the point where she literally like yelled at the baby. And then it kind of turned on her, at least her mental health, because the anger subsided, but she felt so guilty. And had anxiousness that she had yelled at the baby, and she felt like a piece of crap, and like, so it just was this terrible circle. So at that time, did you start to notice that, hey, this might be a postpartum episode that I'm dealing with, or like, what were you going through?
It never crossed my mind.
Okay.
So my fuse with the baby was very short. And I guess I should have caught on or something, or somebody should have caught on, but at the same time, our family wasn't near us. Our family was on the other side of the country. Yeah. And I didn't know any of my classmates super well. Josh didn't talk about what was going on at home with his, coworkers. And I remember one night just screaming, like, at the baby, at Josh, like, I have to do school. How am I expected to do anything? If I'm not sleeping, and I can't handle this. This is bullshit. I didn't even want this kid. Like, all those terrible things where I feel kind of guilty saying them out loud, but it was true. And I remember one day I finally kind of just lost it, and Josh found me. I was crying hysterically, and I was in a pile of dirty laundry in our bathroom, and I was like despondent. Yeah. I couldn't, everything was dark, nothing was going to happen. I was never going to get into, full medical school. I was, as a loser, this child ruined our marriage, ruined my life. Like, now I have to care for this fucking thing. Like, excuse my language. Yeah. And I hated it. I'm like, my figure is crap. My body doesn't work the same. Sex is never going to be the same. Like, I'm never going to be attractive again. And I was just angry. And, I wished it had, caught in my mind. But I think what finally happened is we moved to Yakima because I entered the MAMS program. I ended up having to leave school. Oh, wow. Okay. So I didn't finish my semester.
And this was at a different sort of master's program? Okay.
So I didn't end up, because they had said they would work with me, but I ended up sitting for a midterm like 4 days after I gave birth.
Oh, yeah. What are you supposed to do? Yeah.
I mean, I won't even get into that, but just advocate for yourselves, ladies. Yeah. It was ridiculous. But, I just didn't know how to handle a baby. I didn't know what I was getting into. None of my friends really had babies. And if you Google anything, first of all, no pregnant or new mother should ever Google anything. Ever. No, like, I mean that. That's the first thing I told the friend of yours that I spoke with, like, in our first text message. I was like, whatever you're doing, stop Googling and throw away the book, What to Expect When You're Expecting.
Oh, really? Wow.
Now, that sounds harsh, like, and for some people it works really well.
It seems like that's what you're supposed to do, is try to become as educational, especially as a male. Like, I'm not carrying this kid, so I'd want to be maybe the person that does read all the stupid books. I shouldn't call them stupid, but books. But you're kind of saying, like, go through your own experiences.
Screw those books.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying go in naive. Like, well, you're going to be naive no matter what. I'm saying that those books bring on the guilt early, and they make you feel like you can't do anything right. Yeah. Because it basically makes you feel like, as a pregnant woman, you should be in a giant hamster ball, sterile field everywhere, and only eating from your organic food that was grown 20 feet away. Yeah. And it's terrible. You feel like you can't do anything right. Every moisturizer you use is going to hurt the baby. Yeah. And it puts you in paranoia. You get anxious. So there are some cool books out there that are a little more laid back.
Do you know any off the top of your head?
Yes.
We'll put them in the show notes.
Deal.
They're legit show notes.
Yeah, they're great. There's some really good ones. Anyway, so don't Google, don't read things. Like, pick up the phone and reach out to somebody. Preferably somebody who has a child, because they can kind of identify whether they want to own up to it or not. if you call somebody who's adamantly against having children, that's a bad idea, because they'll be like, see, you shouldn't have done that, and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, that's not what I need to hear.
Yeah.
So we moved to Yakima, and what finally happened is I had like a full breakdown. I'm surprised I didn't get the cops called on me. Mm-hmm. So basically, I was building a fence for my parents, and it was something I really wanted to do because they had been so supportive, and the neighbors got involved and basically took over the project because they didn't think I knew what I was doing. What had happened is the husband came out, and I had made jokes about not knowing what I was doing. I was trying to make him feel comfortable and not emasculated, because obviously I've done like renovations and crap. So they ended up trying to take over the project and saying, you know, like, we really care about this, even though they hadn't pitched in a dime. And I went crazy one night. I went crazy, Logan. Mm-hmm. They had started building the fence. They took down all of my work. They had started building the fence. I lost my shit. Yeah. I finally cracked.
Now, was working on the fence sort of like your therapy, nonetheless? I mean, like, kind of took you out of your mind? Like,
it just made me feel like I was doing something nice for my parents.
Okay.
Like, so the baby was like, Harlan was about 6 months old at this point. So I had been having these little like under waves of symptoms that I didn't realize. Mm-hmm. You know, the anger was still there. And then I really had a lot of resentment for both Josh and the baby, because I felt like I had to leave school because of what Josh wanted. And guess what? He got to go off every day. And I was stuck with it.
Life, yeah.
So anyway, what happened is I went crazy one night, and I took out a circle saw, and I used words I would never use towards a woman under normal circumstances. And
we've all done dumb crap.
Oh, and I threw a 2x4 at her.
We might not all have done that, but
I took the saw and cut down their fence.
Oh, okay.
I called her a very
bad words.
Very bad words.
Don't need to repeat on
I will not. Radio. I will not repeat them. And she was like outside hanging out with one of her friends, and I was like, "Oh, you're drinking a beer?" Like, and I was ready to go over and just bash her over the head with it. I lost my mind. I didn't care what was happening. Like, the rest of the world was just numb to me, and I was just completely out of control.
Yeah.
And I had access to power tools, and I was screaming at them like obscenity. I'm really surprised the cops didn't call. And my mom was crying because she was like, this is just not you. Like, what's going on? But I think it just needed to happen because I was so overwhelmed. And finally, you know, in the aftermath, that's when people started saying, like, have you ever thought about how you may have some kind of postpartum depression?
Yeah.
And I was like, no. Like, I'm a good mom. I do what I'm supposed to do. And they're like, that's not the point. Like,
yeah.
So I ended up going up on my dose of medication, but I just know through all of it, I really wish I had known more of what was happening. I felt really duped because everybody says that parenthood is so wonderful.
Yeah, picture perfect.
And, you know, even if I knew it wasn't picture perfect, I had no idea how isolating it can be for women. I had no idea that if you're on medication like that, it can still hit you hard. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea what the signs were.
Yeah.
And I didn't know to reach out, or I'm really surprised, like, when I spoke to some people, like some of my friends, I'm surprised nobody caught it, because I think people just it never really crosses their mind.
And it's easier just to not bring it up. So maybe when you do have that weird instance where you weren't acting at all like the Elizabeth that I know, that people are like, oh, okay, maybe we should finally say something. Like, it's...
Well, you go... But see, here's the thing is nobody really talks about it, like, at your follow-up appointments either. Like,
really?
You fill out a questionnaire where it's like, are you anxious or depressed? And
are you going to kill yourself today?
Yeah. And nobody sits there and goes, hey, like, and I wish that's what, and I loved the chick who delivered Harlan, but I wish somebody had just sat down, like, in my appointment, whoever it was, and had been like, listen, being a first-time mother is freaking hard. And your whole world has just turned upside down. I wish somebody had just been able to validate all the things I thought I shouldn't be feeling.
Yeah.
And that somebody had just been able to say, it's okay to feel like that. And if you are feeling like that, tell us so that we can get you the help that you need. Because this isn't going to last forever. But right now, everything has changed. Like, everything in your world has changed. Your body has changed. Your priorities have changed. You now have a human being responsible for you. And babies naturally need their mothers a lot more than their fathers. And then if you're nursing and you're having to get up 3 times a night and hate your partner because he's getting to sleep. And mothers have this visceral pain we can't control that when we hear our baby cry, it like physically hurts.
Yeah.
And Josh could sleep right through it.
Yeah.
And I really wish that people had said something.
Yeah, and it seems, at least with your story, you had experienced depression prior to pregnancy, and like you said, this is your first time pregnancy. I don't know if it's at a greater likelihood with the first pregnancy or second, but
I have no idea.
Either way, like the fact that you had previous depression makes you at higher risk of experiencing postpartum. Yeah, and it's
you would have thought it was opposite though, because it's like, or if I was already on medication, you would have thought like, hey, that will help. I mean, it's not going to get worse. Why would it? This is supposed to be a beautiful time in your life where you're now with your baby and like, your husband is there and it's like, hey, we made a baby. Like, this is really cool.
Yeah.
And I really resented that kid for at least a solid year.
Yeah. And I think a lot of mothers probably feel similar feelings. And they're probably super ashamed. Yeah, I was, so before, I came here, I did postpartum depression on YouTube. I was reading a few articles. And it didn't seem like there was a ton of stuff. And so just for comparison, I Googled bipolar disorder, and there was way more YouTube videos, mine being one of them.
Yeah.
With more views than postpartum. And I don't know the exact stats, but I read a stat on some national health website, so I think it's legit. It was 1 out of 7 women experienced postpartum. I figured I don't know what the exact percentage is, but out of the whole population, let's just call it 7. They're estimating the bipolar percentage of the whole population is about 4 to 5. So statistically, there's still a lot more women experience postpartum, but there's less out there.
And that's only the women who will talk about it. Mm-hmm. Or who are willing to say something that would trigger a red flag in a practitioner's mind. So
what would you say to a woman out there who's maybe pregnant or had just given birth, and she's maybe having some of the same similar feelings that you described today? Like, how would you push her in the right direction of trying to improve?
So this may sound like oversimplifying, and I'm not making a mockery of this, but I would first of all tell her, babies suck. Like, yeah. They can be little assholes, and it's not your fault. Like, and it's okay to not like them, to feel like crap, to feel out of control, and everything you're feeling is okay, and it's completely normal whether you've heard other people say it or not. Mm-hmm. And more than anything, I would say, don't Google things. Mothers, on no matter what website, you get trolls on just like anything else, where women just make each other feel like shit.
Yeah.
I have no idea why. Mom shaming is so real, so just understand that you can only do the best you can do, and realize that people are going to judge you no matter what, and your feelings are normal, and you should reach out for help.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's necessarily like your obstetrician. I don't know. Right now, I'm not sure who the best source is besides maybe a friend, or if you're close to a family member, especially one that's had a child. That's what you need to do. Mm-hmm. Or you need to, if failing that, then yes, call your primary care and say, I need to talk to somebody about depression medication.
Yeah.
Something's not right. This doesn't have to be the best time of my life, but I shouldn't be so miserable.
Yeah. So 2 more questions that I'm kind of thinking of. As a male, and I am hopefully going to have kids in the future, I don't know when, with my gorgeous wife, Magdalena. Mm-hmm. But so how could I be a better husband, better adept to understand what's going on with my wife? Because as a male, it's kind of like, hey, I'm good for all the fun stuff of pregnancy, that 1 minute of fun, and then it's game over, and I kind of take a step away, and I just am here for the ride. Just that's it. That's all you need. So how could I be better educated and be a better husband?
First of all, take time off of work, even if there's family around. I think hand the baby off and pay attention to your wife. Like, Josh tried his best at that, but neither of us had really been around babies. Mm-hmm. I think Harlan was the second baby I ever held, and his third or something. So I would say that try and be there for your wife. Even if she says she's okay and she can handle things, step up and take care of everything you can think of. And that means the dishes are done, food is prepared, taking the baby so she can go take a nice long hot shower and a nap.
Mm-hmm.
If the baby is being very loud and hard to calm, you try your best until your wife insists, because sometimes babies just need their moms.
Yeah.
But, it shouldn't be first assumed like, oh, here's the baby. Like, screw that. Like, you made the kid too. Like, step up.
Yeah. And you didn't have to do any of the crap the 9 months before this kid showed up, which I feel it's almost, a man has a certain burden post-birth. Because it's like, yo, dude, you didn't do anything. I know you've been drinking the last 9 months. Yeah. Like, you just, I know I am when how can I handle this? Like, but, so yeah. So now the last question, and I'm thinking about our student class at our medical school, but also a lot of medical schools out that I was surprised how many mothers we had in our class, young mothers.
So we made a group. I don't know if you knew this.
I did not. And well, that's fantastic. But what would you tell me about that group? And maybe other medical schools could develop some sort of social mother support group like this. But what could you tell those sort of medical student mothers, or maybe they're just some of the graduate school level mothers, how to handle this tremendous stress burden that you must be going through?
Or even even other kind of career-driven.
Exactly, career-driven mothers.
But yeah, women who have to deal with stuff outside of the home in addition, like a professional life or whatever. Because anyway, so I just started a little Facebook Messenger group where I called us the keepers of tiny humans.
That's awesome.
Class of 2021. Because, if you're a mom and you're under some kind of high pressure, whether it's a school, whether it's your job, whether it's that you just have a mother-in-law you don't get along with, which I do not have. I'm very fortunate.
Okay.
Something just stressful. You should know that there are other people out there, and the stress you're going through is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
For our case, what I just said is hey, and also I was going to say that those women, no matter what, most of us are going to be we have to have a sense of humor,
mm-hmm.
and we have to have a little bit of perspective on certain things. So, Keepers of Tiny Humans, class of 2021, we all went out to lunch.
Oh, cool.
And chatted with each other. We went to Indian food. I don't know how we were all able to get away. It took a couple weeks of organizing.
Yeah.
And what was nice is just exchanging stories, because a lot of us were not the ones who were like, I can't wait to be a mother. I can't. And like I said, I have friends who were born to be mothers,
mm-hmm.
Amazing. And I'm actually envious of them a lot of times. And it was just really nice because everybody was so comfortable with each other at that point that people spoke. There was only one of us who said that they didn't feel like they were really struggling and they were really doing well. And they have a lot of support, and they are a very, 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 very determined person.
Mm-hmm.
Much more type A than I am.
Yeah.
But she was also very, open about where she has struggled and about how, her spouse can't understand some of it. And it's true, the man can't, and that's not a diss on the husband or the partner, whatever it is. You just can't, because you didn't go through it. That baby isn't as in tune to you.
Well, we don't have the hormonal changes and the physiology, and so it's really not equal at all.
No, and that's okay, because they're going to try and be as supportive as possible. But my main message is, other people are struggling. Don't feel like a failure. And find your people. Find those people who make the inappropriate jokes. The people who say stuff that you're like, most people would not approve of you saying that.
Yeah.
Those can be your people. Because more than anything, if you just have somebody who will sit there and listen, has been through kind of the same thing, that's life-changing.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of glad we're sort of ending on this concept, because where I think made the biggest strides in managing my bipolar disorder is once I moved to Sacramento, with the encouragement of my new roommates, they said, hey, why don't you seek out a bipolar group? And so I found a bipolar and depression support group right in downtown Sacramento called Balanced. If you're listening from Sacramento, I highly suggest looking it up. But it wasn't really just bipolar and depression. It's kind of like anything mental health related, just come through. But just the fact that I was able to meet people who had been maybe dealing with bipolar disorder for decades, and also people that had been maybe just barely newly diagnosed. And it just gave me a really good perspective on how I could help those new people, but how I could learn from those people who had been dealing with this forever. And so I think dealing with mental illness or any sort of mental health challenge, postpartum, whatever, in communities is just so much more superior. Yeah.
No,
isolation.
I'm saying I actually, I'm not meaning to cut you off. It's just that I think it's different with postpartum or when you bring mothers together.
Okay.
It has to be where they have kind of the same level of pressures or whatever. You can't go to and that's one of the biggest challenges and why it's probably not spoken about more, is you can't just go to a regular support group or, a play date and start talking about the things you're experiencing. It makes people, one, very uncomfortable, even if they had the same thing. Two, there's always going to be some chick who mouths off or says the wrong thing that will either set you off, or you'll be like, well, what the hell do you know? You're not going through what I'm going through, or you are and you're lying, and it can get ugly, because not only mothers, but society in general can be really hard on mothers.
Yeah.
Really hard.
Yeah, and I think especially on mothers that are career focused.
Yes.
And I think there's a different stigma attached to that. So, I mean, do you have a certain particular advice in finding the right support group for you?
That's the hard part, is there's not, and that's maybe something I should look into doing, is creating something where, I guess there are a couple blogs where I really like it, where they just kind of make light.
And what are the name of those blogs?
Well, I don't know. There's scarymommy.com.
Okay.
There's Mothers Who Drink and Swear.
Nice.
Which, that one I haven't read a bunch, but the reviews are great. Now, there's a book called I Heart My Little A-Holes, is by this woman who named, I think, Baby Sideburns, which is hilarious. And it's very comforting because it comes from a very non-judgmental point of view. And starting there at least can at least introduce you to some of that. Just don't read the comments. Don't read people's trolling crap like that. And then also just keep perspective. If you do go to a support group or a play date, realize it's hard to remind yourself at times and to not get super defensive. But other women are just coming from different points of view, different priorities, different, and something's probably going to just frustrate you, but feel out the room. Maybe you can find your people, and that's wonderful, but start at least with those kind of blogs or the book that makes light of this, because you have to laugh. Yeah.
Well, and it seems like your message isn't more you still advocate for community-based sort of management of whatever you're going through, but most effectively, it sounds like start with the people that you're homies with, your family, your friends.
Start with your safe place.
Yeah, and for you, it was the classmates, and because we come from a very relatively small school, you knew all these women relatively well before you kind of started this. So I think it's all really good advice, though.
Yeah, and everybody was at a different stage. I actually didn't know a lot of them, and then we kind of just all were feeling each other out for the first 20 minutes, and then we all loosened up, because we all realized we had a lot in common, dealing with the same monster.
Well, that's great.
So,
anything else you want to
do? So, on that note, I would say, if you are trying to figure out who your person is, if you were to murder someone tomorrow, who would you call? Because that's a person you should call about this. Not because
who would help you bury the body?
Exactly, or who would be there next to you in your jail cells. That was fun. That's your person you need to call.
Okay. And even if they basically have maybe no knowledge about postpartum, mental health in general, they'll probably love you enough that they're going to be a listening ear, that they're going to give a crap and, try to help.
I mean, maybe that contradicts me a little bit earlier. But
I don't think so.
I'm just saying find your safe place and speak.
Well, hell yeah. Let's end on that note.
Yeah.
Cheers. And that is a wrap on episode 11. I want to thank you so much for listening and tuning in. You guys make this podcast really, really fun, that I've already been able to build an audience and that I continue to see to grow. So once again, thank you so much for listening. Some news upcoming on the podcast is I'm now starting to do remote interview podcasts. Essentially, once again, I have no idea what I'm doing. All summer, I've been trying to figure out what software I need to purchase for my computer so I can listen to Skype calls or FaceTime or whatever. And it's been rather frustrating. So if you are listening, if you have any experience with remote interviews and recording and podcasting, I would love your assistance. Please reach out to me at Facebook, Instagram, whatever, at Logan Noon. That's Noon spelled with an E at the end. Dr. No One at your service 7 years from now. Okay, chill out. Whoa, only second year medical student here. Relax. 5-star rating, please.